organizational economies. Organizational economies means if the firm size is large, it can centralize a lot of facilities. For example, HR department, only one HR department can take care of all the HR related activities of the organization. So a centralized HR department will be sufficient. But for maybe for 500 employees or 1,000 employees. But if the size of the firm is very small, and an HR manager has to be appointed, and the size of the the employees are not very large, in that case it will lead to diseconomies. So organizational economies is also one of the reason why economies of scale works. So organizational economies, with a large firm, individual plants can specialize in particular functions. There can also be centralized administration of the firm. For example, one human resource department could administer all the wages. Often, after a merger between two firms, savings can be made by rationalizing their activities in this way. So, if in a particular department, I mean, more people have been employed, so the number of people can be rationalized and cost cutting can be achieved. So this kind of economies are called organizational economies. That some kinds of cost saving happens because the size of the organization is large. Then we have spreading overhead effect. There are some kinds of large overheads which are only economical if the size of the firm is large. Small firms cannot afford such kind of expenditure, such as research and development. Then we have financial economies. Financial economies examples include a bulk discount. So only a large firm which is operating at a large scale can get bulk discount. Similarly, large organizations are sometimes able to get discounts as far as the rate of interest on loan is concerned. Now, the opposite effect of the economies of scale is called diseconomies of scale. Economies of scale is a phenomena where the unit cost reduces once we increase the scale of production. But if the unit cost starts increasing instead of decreasing, that phenomena is called diseconomies of scale. It's not that producing at a large scale will always lead to economies of scale. There are forces of economies of scale, and then there are forces of diseconomies of scale. So sometimes when a firm becomes very large, the forces of diseconomies of scale are more potent, and it is beneficial to cut down the scale of the production because of the diseconomies of scale. So economies of and diseconomies of scale is also one of the reason why sometimes firms go for merger and acquisition, and sometimes firms also go for demerger. Demerger, for example, if the firm is facing severe diseconomies of scale, in that case, the firm may decide to go for demerger also, separation of the two business units. So these, economies and diseconomies of scale is one of the consideration and forces behind merger and acquisition also. So if a firm feels that if it acquires another firm and it will lead to economies of scale, then acquisition will be beneficial. But if the firm feels that the target firm is facing diseconomies of scale, it needs to be demerged, then in that case merger will not be beneficial. In fact, the existing firm has to demerge its existing businesses into different parts to avoid diseconomies of scale. So when firms get beyond a certain size, costs per unit of output may start to increase. There are several reasons for such diseconomies of scale. Management problems of coordination. So coordination and monitoring cost is one major reason behind diseconomies of scale. When the size of a firm increases, a lot, in that case, a lot of money goes into coordination and management and monitoring. Monitoring means whatever task has been assigned to an employee, the cost of ensuring and supervising whether that person is actually doing whatever task has been assigned to him as per the expectations of the company or not. So a lot of costs are involved. There are systems for monitoring. There are managers. There are supervisors. There are bosses which are whose task is just to supervise and coordinate and monitor employees. So when the size of the firm becomes very large, in that case the problem of coordination and monitoring sometimes leads to diseconomies of scale. So monitoring costs are the costs incurred by the organizer of production in seeing to it that the employees do what they are supposed to do. The more checks and balances are needed to ensure that the right hand and the left hand are coordinated. So the more the larger is the size of an organization, the more checks and balance are required. Systems have to be developed for monitoring whether actually doing what they are supposed to do or not. So if sometimes the problem arises from the root of the problem is coordination and monitoring. So the larger the organization, the more checks and balances and the more paperwork. Most big firms have several layers of bureaucracy. Layers of bureaucracy. Layers of bureaucracy mean there are too much layers. I mean, from the floor worker to the CEO and managing director, there are too many layers of uh, management roles and that can be termed as bureaucracy. So these long, layers of bureaucracy leads to inefficiency, and these long layers of bureaucracy itself is a problem which leads to diseconomies of scale. So most big firms have several layers of bureaucracy devoted simply to monitoring employees. As the firm becomes larger and more complex, and lines of communication uh, gets longer, the job of middle manager is to a large extent monitoring. So the middle manager, the main job of the middle manager is just to monitor other employees. So the cost of hiring that middle manager, will lead to diseconomies of scale. Alienation and lack of motivation, team spirit. Sometimes when the number of employees is very large, that may lead to alienation of workers from their job. They may not get develop interest in their work, whatever they are doing, and they may not feel associated with the company. They may not feel connected with the work culture of an organization. So workers may feel alienated if their jobs are boring and repetitive, and if they feel that they are a small part of a large organization. Small to medium sized companies often report that workers feel they make a difference. So if an employee is working at a small firm and or maybe a mid-sized firm, in that case, persons feel connected with the company, and they feel that they are making some difference. They are important to the company. But if the size of the company is very large, An individual employee sometimes feels that he or she is not important for the company, and he is not making any difference, and he is not important to the company. So this leads to demotivation and alienation. So this may be lost motivation may lead to shoddy work. As the size of the firm increases, team spirit or morale generally decreases. So the team spirit and morale is normally good when the team size is small, and when the team size is very big. In that case, team spirit and morale normally decreases. Sometimes when industrial relation also deteriorates, when because of union, because of protest, because of the non-cordial relationship between labor and management. So industrial problems may also lead to diseconomies of scale, may deteriorate as a result of these factors, and also as a result of the more complex interrelationships between different categories of worker. More levels of people management may therefore be required. Economies and diseconomies of scale play important roles in real world long run production decisions. Economies of scale are an important reason why firms attempt to expand their markets either at home or abroad. If they can make or sell more at lower per unit cost, they will make more profit. These economies of scale prevent a firm from expanding and can lead corporate raiders to buy the firm and break it up in the hope that the smaller production units will be more efficient, thus eliminating some of the diseconomies of scale. So the economies and diseconomies of scale is also one of the reason why some firms go for expansion and some firms go for corporate raiders, or that is acquisition, hostile acquisition. So if the firm is experiencing and economies of scale, and in that case the firm may decide to expand. But and similarly, if a particular firm is experiencing diseconomies of scale, in that case corporate raiders or hostile takeover may take place, and the company that is acting as acquirer will break the acquiring firm into parts to achieve economies of scale. Because of this economies of scale, the firm is facing problem, and once it will break down into smaller parts, the firm may experience economies of scale. A related concept with the economies of scale is economies of scope. Both are related concept, but they are different with economies of scale and economies of scope. Often a firm is large because it produces a range of products. This can result in each individual product being produced more cheaply than if it was produced in a single product firm. The reason for these economies of scope is that various overhead costs and financial and organizational economies can be shared among products. For example, a firm that produces a whole range of CD players, amplifiers, and tuners can benefit from shared marketing and distribution cost and the bulk purchase of electronic components. So when a firm is producing several related products, say for example, maybe an electronic firm, say for example Samsung. So Samsung is producing ACs also, fridges also, then TV sets also, and mobiles and different electronic gadgets. So as far as marketing of those gadgets is concerned, the budget of marketing can be shared for all those products. So some saving happens because of that also. Similarly, several tasks or several manufacturing parts may be common in different gadgets, so those can be produced. So sometimes when two or more products are produced jointly, some costs are saved. So that cost saving is known as economies of scope. Economies of scale happens because of producing at a large scale of a single product. If a single product is being produced at a large scale and cost saving is happening, that is called economies of scale. But economies of scope means when a single firm is producing a range of products, a number of products jointly. In that case, some cost saving happens, and that is called economies of scope. And one of the example is that, for example, marketing cost. So marketing cost can be shared among all those products that are being produced jointly. So the degree of economies of scale, to measure the degree to which there are economies of scope, we should ask what percentage of the cost of production is saved when two or more products are produced jointly rather than individually. So SC, that is economies of scope, is equal to cost of producing Q1 plus cost of producing Q2 minus cost of jointly producing Q1 and Q2. This is cost of producing product Q1 and Q2 jointly, and this is cost of producing separately. So if Q1 and Q2 are produced separately, that cost is denoted by CQ1 and CQ2. And if Q1 and Q2 are produced jointly, this is joint production. Joint production in that case, and divided by the cost of producing them jointly. So the cost saving because of joint production is called economies of scope. And in terms of percentage, we can calculate, if we have figures, we can calculate the degree of the economies of scope in terms of percentage. So degree of economies of scope is the percentage of cost savings resulting when two or more products are produced jointly rather than individually. So if cost saving is happening because of joint production, that is called economies of scope. So that is why you might have seen that a lot of companies, when they start producing a particular product, they also start producing some related products because of economies of scope, because a lot of savings can be happened, a lot of savings can be achieved because of economies of scope. So if the cost of joint production is less than the cost of producing different products separately, that is called economies of scope. And if the cost of joint production is more, in that case, that phenomena is called diseconomies of scope. So economies of scale exist if the firm achieves unit cost of saving as it increases the production of given goods or services. And economies of scope exist if the firm achieves saving as it increases the variety of goods and services it produces. So economies of scope is related to a variety of products and services, whereas economies of scale is related to a single product. So economies of scope is a situation in which joint output of a single firm is greater than output That could be achieved by two different firms when each produces a single product. So if there are two firms and every firm is producing a single product, and if they decide to combine their production unit together, and they decide to jointly produce the two products, and as a result the unit cost per product has reduced, that situation is called economies of scope. And similarly, the opposite effect is called diseconomies of scope. Situation in which the joint output of a single firm is less than could be achieved by separate firms when each produces a single product. Economies of scope play an important role in firms' decisions about what combinations of goods to produce. They look for both economies of scope and economies of scale. When you read about firms' mergers, think about whether the combination of their products will generate economies of scope. Many otherwise unexplainable mergers between seemingly incompatible firms can be explained by economies of scope. So this was for today's discussion. If you have any question or observation, you can make. Okay. So
No question, sir.
okay, so let's call it a day, and
Thank you, sir.
we'll continue tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sir.
sir.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.